Atlas Rex, the Emperor of Fists. In the year 2147, the United States of North America had long since merged corporate capitalism with state authority, forging a world where power was currency and children were investments. Every major family of influence enrolled their offspring in one of the elite Politburo academies, where future leaders were forged like weapons on a factory line. Among these gilded halls of ambition stood Atlas Rex, age 7, short, meaty, and built like a human wrecking ball wrapped in baby fat and unshakable confidence. From the moment his chauffeured grav car landed on the polished diamondcrete courtyard of Dominion Academy of Leadership, Atlas knew he didn't belong to the bottom of any hierarchy. He waddled out of the sleek black vehicle, wearing a custom-fitted Navy uniform stretched tight across his wide shoulders, his lunchbox clutched like a royal scepter. Eyes turned immediately, not because he was the smallest among them, but because he radiated an aura of dangerous certainty. Fresh meat, sneered a lanky third-year boy, his blazer lined with gold piping denoting lineage from one of the corporate dynasties of the Northwest conglomerate. A ring of upperclassmen closed in. Tradition demanded it. The first day haze had been law at Dominion for centuries. Every newcomer faced a test of humiliation, to be trampled early. Hand over your rations and kiss my boot, freshman, the third year mocked, thrusting his foot forward, the scuffed tip of his expensive shoe hovering inches from Atlas's face. Atlas didn't blink. His mind moved faster than anyone his age, faster than most adults, but he didn't need genius for this. His world was simple when fists spoke. Hit hard, hit fast. The boy's words hadn't even finished echoing when Atlas's pudgy but terrifyingly dense fist drove upward in a clean, perfect arc. Crack! The upperclassman's body went airborne, folding midair before crumpling on the diamondcrete like a discarded drone. Silence swept the courtyard. Everyone, from first year to senior prefects, stared at the 7-year-old anomaly, who had just shattered an age-old pecking order on his first day. Atlas adjusted his blazer, grunted once. Somewhere above, the AI headmaster, an ancient intelligence older than the academy itself, registered his name on a private list, not for punishment, but for potential. And so began the legend of Atlas Rex, the boy destined to tear down centuries of ritual, reshape the future of power, and make a broken system bow, not through politics, but through an unshakable will and fists of iron. At 15 years old, Atlas Rex was no longer just a prodigy. He was myth made flesh. The halls of Dominion Academy whispered his name like a storm warning. He had rewritten every rule of conflict on campus, not by avoiding it, but by turning violence into a fine art of dominance. His fists had ended every challenge, his mind had made every victory inevitable, and his legend had reached the Politburo itself, a council where violence was no longer condemned, but celebrated as leadership incarnate. He was set to graduate 3 years early, something only one other person had achieved in the last century. The entire academy gathered under the gleaming glass spires for the ceremony, but Rex felt the tension in the air long before the speeches began. He expected this. Dominion's final test wasn't on any syllabus. It was an ambush, a last attempt to remind the rising star that even legends could bleed. 5 of them approached, seniors aged 18, the best of the best, polished weapons of the Academy's brutal philosophy. They were already whispered about as future generals and Politburo tacticians, each specialized in a different combat style: grappling, blades, precision striking, brute force, and a hybrid mix that had crushed hundreds before. They surrounded him at the foot of the graduation stage. The crowd's breath held in collective silence. The lead challenger spat the words every Dominion student knew. Tradition says no one leaves untested. Your reign ends here, Rex. Atlas didn't hesitate. He didn't even speak. Violence was his only reply. The first came in with a low tackle. Rex slipped aside like mercury, his bulk deceptive, and hammered a fist to the back of the skull with the efficiency of a guillotine. The body dropped lifeless, throat rattling. A second charged with the hidden blade. Rex caught the wrist mid-strike, snapped it like brittle wood, and buried an elbow into the temple. A clean kill. The third and fourth attacked in tandem, one grappling, one swinging for his ribs. Rex used the grappler as a human shield, spun, and drove both fists into the striker's chest until the man stopped moving. The grappler followed seconds later with a fatal neck twist. The last opponent tried to flee, seeing that the others had failed to do. Rex hunted him down like prey, grabbed a fistful of hair, and ended it with a single thunderous blow to the jaw that never let the boy breathe again. The whole fight had lasted 32 seconds. The courtyard smelled of iron and silence. Without wiping the blood from his hands, Atlas climbed the stage, adjusted his immaculate uniform, and faced the Politburo representatives, governors, and CEOs who ruled the U.S.A. He took the podium, his voice cold but clear. Leadership, he said, is not earned by birthright, tradition, or committee vote. Leadership is taken. Power is the language of this world, and today you all saw that I speak it fluently. Follow me or fear me, but never stand in my way. The audience erupted, not in outrage, but in thunderous approval. The Politburo had found its next heir, a boy who embodied their world's creed. Violence was not failure of diplomacy. It was diplomacy perfected. Atlas Rex walked off that stage not just as valedictorian, but as the inevitable future ruler of the United States of North America. At the age of 20, Atlas Rex was not just a leader, he was the empire incarnate. The United States of North America had become a military leviathan, its vast population living only to feed the war machine that bore his name. The Politburo had dissolved into irrelevance. Congress existed only as a formality. Every decision, every ration, every bullet manufactured and words spoken in public was under his direct command. The supreme leadership seat, unclaimed for a century, had become Rex's. To his people, he was not a man but a force of nature, feared, adored, unquestioned. Until one man made the smallest mistake. His mentor, Director Callum Vey, had been with him since his first day at Dominion Academy, a guiding hand, a strategist, one of the few Rex ever called teacher. But in the relentless bureaucracy of empire, Callum had dared to make minor governing decisions on Rex's behalf, simply to lighten his load. He had not sought to seize power, not sought to defy him, only to serve him more efficiently. For Atlas Rex, there was no such thing as a small breach of law. The trial was public, broadcast on every hologram across the continent, Rex's voice carrying like judgment itself. No law is higher than me. No decision is made without me. You will not say you meant well. You will say you were saving me time. You will say you broke the law, and you will pay. Callum knelt before him, trembling, tears streaking down his weathered face. Atlas, my emperor, my son, I only... Rex raised a hand. The silence was immediate. You will fight me, To the death, bare-knuckled, no rules. The arena was set under floodlights, cameras circling like vultures. Millions tuned in across the USNA. They would watch justice, brutal and unfiltered, with their emperor as both judge and executioner. Callum whispered apologies even as the fight began. But once Rex charged, the old man's survival instincts took over. He attacked like a cornered animal, every strike desperate, wild, full of fear and regret. Rex took every blow with ease, slipping, dodging, countering with surgical brutality. Each strike he landed was devastating, but never enough to end it. Not yet. He wanted the fight long, a lesson burned into the nation's eyes. Rex's laughter came low and terrifying between blows. Do you feel how small you are? Every fist you throw against me is a lie. You know there's only one will in this nation, and it isn't yours. Minutes stretched into half-hour of systematic destruction. By the time Rex finally landed the last earth-shaking punch, Callum's body was unrecognizable. The mentor who once guided him lay motionless, breath gone, blood staining the Emperor's fists. Without ceremony, Rex scooped the lifeless man into his arms. Cameras followed as he walked through the Imperial Citadel's corridors, past bowing soldiers and silent ministers, out into the courtyard where an industrial refuse chute waited. He placed Callum's body on the edge, looked down at it one final time, and said, "He was my teacher. He made a mistake. I honor him with this truth. No man stands above the law, not even the ones I love." With one final push, he cast the body into the chute, watching it vanish into the abyss. Then he turned to the cameras, expression blank. "This is humility. This is justice. This is what it means to lead." The video would replay every screen for years, a message to all thought they could act without the Emperor's direct will. Fear was not just policy. It was Atlas Rex himself. By age 30, Atlas Rex had ruled the United States of North America for over a decade, with an iron will unmatched in history. Under his reign, the empire had achieved unprecedented prosperity. Not for luxury, not for personal decadence, but for the only purpose he deemed worthy: fueling the greatest military machine humanity had ever seen. The people were fed, watered, and sheltered. No hunger, no homelessness, no unemployment. Yet there was nothing beyond necessity. No art, no frivolity, no wealth outside the state's command. Even in the old Politburo capital, the once ornate palace of leadership had been stripped bare. Marble walls were unpolished, golden chandeliers gone, priceless art long recycled into materials for war drones. Rex himself lived in a narrow steel bunk with a single locker, indistinguishable from the soldiers' barracks beside him. To him, a ruler lived as his people did, if only to prove nothing stood above the machine he had built. It was on a gray afternoon that a group of veteran foremen, grizzled men who had worked the furnaces, assembly lines, and munition plants since before his rise, requested an audience. They came humbly, not rebellious, not angry, simply seeking a union charter, a means to share collective grievances, to ask for small adjustments to schedules and workloads. They made it clear they would work regardless of Rex's decision, with full loyalty to the Empire. Atlas listened, and then he stood. Without raising his voice, he gave a signal. A massive construction pit was prepared outside the capital within the hour. Surrounded by the silent watch of soldiers and cameras, Rex appeared, stepping down into the pit, his presence heavy as iron. He began stripping off his military uniform, boots, gloves, everything, until he stood completely bare beneath the steel sky, not as an emperor, but as a man who ruled by violence and will alone. The workers, confused and hesitant, were ordered to do the same. Dozens of them against one man. No rules, nothing but flesh, fists, and fury. The fight lasted hours. The pit was chaos, grappling, stomping, biting, every desperate strike the workers could muster. Rex took them apart one by one, never rushing, never letting fatigue claim him. He dragged it out, letting every camera, every citizen watch the broadcast understand. No collective, no number of men, no force on earth could match him. The pit filled with broken, unmoving bodies, their blood mixing with dirt, rain, and sweat. When the last foreman fell silent beneath his fists, Rex stood over the mound of unconscious and lifeless workers, his chest heaving with controlled breath. He gave a single nod, and soldiers carried the bodies to a waiting recycling transport, their fallen forms handled with methodical respect. There was no mockery, no laughter, only the ritual of disposal, the Empire's truth played out in real time for all to witness. Then Rex picked up a high-pressure water gun, climbed down into the pit himself, and began washing away the blood and filth. Every stroke of the spray was deliberate, mechanical, erasing all trace of the slaughter until the ground was clean once more. Cameras followed every second as he straightened, water running down his bare frame, and faced the nation. His speech was calm, steady, and terrifyingly beautiful. There are no unions in the Empire. There is no division between worker and ruler, for I am the worker, and I am the ruler. Your labor feeds your armies, your sweat builds our future, your lives fuel the machine that shields this nation from every threat beyond our walls. You came not to rebel, not to defy, but to test whether power could be shared. It cannot. It must not. Power rests here. He strikes his fist against his chest, hard enough to echo in the pit, and nowhere else. Today, I have reminded you what you already knew. The Empire is my body, my will, my hands, and there is nothing that can stand against them. The camera pulled back on the image of the naked Emperor standing over the freshly washed ground, steam rising where water met blood-warmed earth. The message was clear. Even peace must bend to his singular, brutal law. Four decades into his life, Atlas Rex was no longer just a legend. He was an institution, a living law, a single will upon which the Empire turned. At 40, he stood short but terrifyingly thick, a solid mass of muscle bound with fat like armor, his fists looking more like stone hammers than human hands. His dark hair was full, perfectly kept, his face smooth and clean-shaven, his eyes burning with an intensity that had not dimmed since his days in the academy. The transgression came from a sect of special forces, among the most loyal and battle-hardened men and women in the Empire. They had been found using chemical stimulants to stay awake during multi-day assignments, the kind of missions that forged heroes and ghosts alike. When confronted, they did not lie, did not rebel, did not ask for mercy. They admitted their use, explained their reasons with bowed heads and trembling voices. It was for the mission, to serve longer, to fail less. Atlas heard them, and then, as always, he passed judgment in the only way his empire understood. A square mound, hastily constructed from reinforced steel and dirt, rose outside the capital within hours. Cameras were mounted, drones circling, ready to broadcast another trial to every citizen and soldier across the empire. Atlas entered the pit wearing only a pair of clean, loose-fitting, white cotton undergarments, his bare feet gripping the soil, his fists clenched. The soldiers were lined up one by one, clad in their favorite combat uniforms. Ceremonial battle gear, tactical fatigues, even full exosuit helmets that would not save them. Before each fight, Rex himself forced a syringe into their arms, injecting the very drugs they had used, making them stagger under the intoxicating, humiliating rush. "Feel the filth you put in your veins," he growled at each of them. "Feel it, then face me like the broken things you chose to be." And then he fought them. Each bout was a storm of feral violence. The drugged soldiers fought, snarling, screaming, 10 times as strong, 10 times as reckless, but never enough. Rex met every strike with counters that broke bones, ruptured organs, and shattered skulls. He drew it out deliberately, minutes, sometimes half an hour per fight, beating them down with a smiling cruelty, laughing low as each man or woman realized they were nothing compared to the Emperor's raw, unyielding force. One soldier, frothing at the mouth, lunged with all the speed the drugs granted him. Rex caught his arm, twisted it until it tore from its socket, then slammed his fists into the soldier's head until there was no fight left. Another tried to tackle low. Rex's knee crushed ribs, then his fists finished the work in a gruesome rhythm that silenced even the howling crowd. One by one, bodies were tossed aside like rags, Rex dragging them by a single arm, hurling them into a nearby garbage transport truck waiting to collect the dead. He did this without ceremony, without reverence, not as a ruler handling soldiers, but as a man discarding waste unworthy of his machine. When the last body was thrown, Rex climbed to the edge of the pit, red-faced and heavy with rage, blood streaking his forearms, spittle flying as he roared into the cameras. "Drugs are rot. Drugs are weakness, and weakness is treason. These soldiers were loyal, but they let filth touch their blood. There is no excuse. There is no mercy. A soldier is forged in pain, not chemicals. A soldier fights until death because his will is pure, not stolen from a vial. Look at this pit. Look at what the drugs make of you. Trash. Trash for the fire. Trash for the earth. Trash for the Empire's gutter." He turned and slammed his fist into the steel wall of the mound, leaving a crater. The drones hovered, silent witnesses as the nation watched their emperor, half naked, blood-soaked, triumphant and furious, promise a future where no impurity would survive his reign. At 50 years old, Atlas Rex had become more than mortal, more than legend. He was the foundation of the United States of North America, its law embodied in a single man, its soul built from his fists. He stood barely taller than in his youth, his huge gut hanging like a barrel of iron, yet beneath every inch of him were brick slabs of muscle, knotted and immovable. His calves curved like horseshoes forged in hellfire, every joint swollen with strength built from decades of endless combat. His face was carved with lines of age and wisdom, yet his eyes were bright, sharp, unclouded, carrying a depth that made even generals hesitate to meet his gaze. His hair remained thick, perfectly groomed, as though time itself had decided to leave him untouched. For 3 decades, his legalist empire had been flawless. Every citizen had a meal, a bed, a partner to love, and a purpose to serve. Every child, regardless of birth, was educated to a PhD level, their minds sharpened as weapons for the machine of progress. And all of it, the endless production, the unbreakable order, The tireless march of civilization existed for one purpose only: to feed the military, the eternal shield and sword of Rex's world. And yet, Rex himself never claimed his throne was permanent. At any time, anyone in the Empire, citizen, soldier, worker, genius, could challenge him for leadership, stepping into the arena to test the law of flesh against the Emperor himself. For years, challengers came. Some were young savants, prodigy warriors trained since infancy, whispered to be future kings of war. Some were grizzled veterans, hardened by decades of battlefield slaughter. Others were scholars, strategists, inventors, believing that brilliance could outmatch the brute force of law. The arena was always the same: a pit of dust and steel, no clothing, no weapons, no rules, only the human body as nature made it. Rex would strip to nothing but skin and step forward with his massive scarred fists, his gut hanging, his muscles flexing like the roots of ancient trees. The fights were not swift. Rex never humiliated his opponents with quick victories. He dragged them out, letting them give their best, letting them believe, for one breath, 1 minute, 1 hour, that they had a chance. Then, systematically, he would tear apart their hopes, his strikes ending in fatal knockouts that left bodies crumpled and lifeless. The dead were removed with solemn ceremony, carried away on black carts, the crowd bowing their heads in reverence not for the fallen, but for the Emperor's perfection. The battles were televised 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Screens across the Empire glowed endlessly with the same ritual: the challenge, the fight, the inevitable victory, the disposal of the body. Children grew up watching Rex's hand shape the law. Lovers fell asleep to the sound of his fists landing like thunder. Workers toiled happily beneath the hum of the screens, knowing their ruler could never be bested, that no ambition would ever fracture the Empire's perfect unity. And they loved it. They loved him. They loved the order, the brutal clarity, the entertainment of watching every dreamer meet the same fate, broken beneath the one man who could never be defeated. To them, this was happiness, and no other way of life was worth imagining. Rex would sometimes turn to the camera after a bout, covered in blood, chest heaving, and simply say, "This is leadership. This is law. This is love." The nation would cheer, millions of voices screaming their devotion, their emperor's image glowing above every city like a god carved from flesh, fists, and the unbreakable will to rule forever. "70 years old, Atlas Rex still reigns supreme. For 5 decades, his name had been the foundation of the United States of North America, his fists the ultimate law of man. Every citizen had a PhD level education, a loved one, 4 children, a meal, shelter, work, and the iron clarity of order. His empire had never known corruption, famine, or rebellion, not because of laws on paper, but because every challenge had been answered by his bare hands. And yet, on that day, as he stood bloodied and breathing hard over the corpse of a worthy challenger, something happened that had never happened before. Deep in his back, across his shoulder, down to his fists, Atlas Rex felt pain. Not injury from a strike. No one had ever landed one clean. But the first whisper of age, a tension in his bones that he could not punch away. For the first time in 70 years, he understood a truth he had denied for decades. Even the Emperor could not fight forever. The next morning, Rex walked into the capital, stripped bare of his title's finery, and issued a new decree. The Empire would decentralize. No longer would all roads lead to him. No longer would every breath of governance depend on his will alone. He would build a nation that could stand even when his fists no longer could. But the transition was not clean. Some ministers, soldiers, scholars came forward with well-meaning ideas, suggestions to keep the machine efficient, proposals to retain a trace of the absolute order under his guidance. Each time, no matter the place, a council chamber, a field inspection, a public street, Rex's reaction was instant and merciless. He would strip down to nothing, demand they do the same, and challenge them in the most primal trial of law he had ever given. You think you know better than my will? Prove it, here, now, to the death. Meetings became arenas. Diplomatic galas became pits of blood and dirt. Once, in the middle of a live broadcast with foreign dignitaries, a young idealist dared to say, "Perhaps we should keep centralized military oversight." Rex stood, tore off his clothes, and barked, "No, perhaps. Fight me or shut your mouth." Seconds later, the youth lay broken and lifeless as cameras rolled, Rex's fist raised in final judgment. Again and again, productivity-driven dissent was met with fatal bare-knuckle brawls, until no one dared suggest halting decentralization. By his 71st year, the transformation was complete. The empire no longer ran through one man. It ran through millions, each family, each worker, each thinker running their own patch of the great machine. Citizens had choices of labor, choices of consumption, choices of entertainment, dozens of different screens broadcasting countless shows, not just the old ritualized combat of leadership, but stories, music, invention, and life beyond him. Rex himself could walk the streets in peace, often only clad in his clean, loose-fitting white undergarments, no longer a god king above his people, but a man among them, greeted by name, offered bread or a handshake. Children waved, merchants tipped their hats. He needed no guards. Every person in the empire loved him not as ruler, but as the man who had once shaped their world with his fists, and then had the strength to let it go. And yet, whenever someone saw his shadow in an alley, or heard his calm steps approach, they remembered the truth that built their nation. He may no longer lead, but no one would ever dare fight Atlas Rex. "80 years old, and Atlas Rex still walked the streets as the most feared and beloved man in history. Age had compressed him, made him shorter, more compact, but no less monolithic. His body had grown wider, heavier, his gut now legendary, hanging over his waistband like a shield of fat and iron. Yet beneath it all, granite slabs of muscle still coiled, dense and unstoppable. His arms and legs as thick as tree trunks, his fists enormous, gnarled knuckles like weathered stone, shaped by 70 years of breaking the unbreakable. His hair was still thick and dark, streaked only now with silver at the temples, a crown of time that even the years couldn't take fully. His eyes remained clear and sharp, the gaze of a man who stared down thousands and never blinked first. When he walked through the city, people cheered, waved, recorded videos, not because he was their ruler anymore, but because he was their story, their myth, their eternal champion. The world had changed. Streets bustled with freedom and choice. Shops sold wild fashions and food from 100 cultures. Some citizens lived rich, luxurious lives. Others worked hard for little more than a bed and a meal. But everyone chose their path, and they were happy, especially when the people's champ passed by, smiling, shaking hands, nodding to children who grew up hearing tales of his rule. That was when the punk appeared. A loudmouth celebrity, a young fighter turned media sensation, swaggered up to Rex with cameras following, fans cheering. The kid had a plan, a super fight, A spectacle months down the road, millions in payouts, sponsors lined up, a show for the ages. He pitched it fast, hoping to turn Rex into a payday. Atlas Rex didn't say a word. He simply took off his coat, his shirt, his boots, stripping down in the middle of the street until only his thick, scarred, naked body stood under the sun. The crowd gasped, then roared. They knew what this meant. Phones came up. Live streams started. The young punk blinked, then grinned nervously, stripping too, because you didn't say no to a challenge from Atlas Rex when the world was watching. The fight was pure theater. Rex dragged it out, taking the kid into deep waters, letting him throw every wild, desperate punch his youth and bravado could muster. Rex showboated for the cameras, exaggeratingly dodging, throwing mock jabs, making faces to the laughing crowd, even pointing at the phones filming every second. With the tension built, a legendary showman's spectacle, finally, when the kid could barely stand, Rex delivered the fatal knockout, a single devastating fist that sent the challenger crumpling to the pavement, unmoving, silence falling before the cheers erupted again. Rex walked on, barefoot and bare naked, wiping blood from his knuckles with a rag as if nothing had happened, stopping to pet a dog and buy a pastry from a street vendor. The video went instantly viral, spreading across every screen, every network, the old man once again reminding the world who he was. Sponsors poured out fortunes for the footage. Betting pools exploded. Merchandise sold in minutes. The punk's plan to profit worked, just not for himself. Atlas Rex simply donated every credit, funding schools, shelters, veteran homes, never keeping a dime. In the many years after his passing, the people forever smiled at the history of Atlas Rex. His name was eternal. The man who built an empire with his fists. The man who had broken every challenger. The man who had given it all away and lived only to walk among his people, free and undefeated. Atlas Rex, the people's champ, forever. The end.